Welcome to lesson number 36, Computer Validation. In this lesson, we will be looking at what is computer validation, what needs to be validated, the V model and the 4Q model in relation to computer validation, GAMP5, and computer validation steps. The computer system is composed of software, hardware, equipment, processor, the user. Hardware and software are considered two distinct areas that must be addressed within the computer system validation policy. What is computer validation, known as CSV? It's confirmation by examination and provision of objective evidence that software specifications conform to user needs and intended uses, and that the particular requirements implemented through software can be consistently fulfilled. That is a definition from the FDA. Computer systems should be considered as equipment when it comes to validation. Computer systems should be validated in accordance with the level appropriate for their use and application. The utilization of a computer system includes different stages: planning, your URS; specification, your functional specification; programming, the system build; testing and commissioning, including your IQ, OQ, and PQ; document operation; and monitoring and modifying. What needs to be validated? Well, GMP-sensitive systems must be validated. These can be things like process control systems. Often PLC, programmable logic controllers, are typically bespoke. Computer equipment or embedded systems such as autoclave, the tablet press, or laboratory instruments. MRP, manufacturing resource planning systems. So these are GMP critical systems which are responsible for things like material approval status, batch release, control of expiry dates, etc. Applications based on commercial packages such as spreadsheets that are widely used in QC for carrying out calculations and for reporting results. The 4Q model that we have been familiar with in our other lessons can also be applied to computer system validation. Your design qualification covers your user requirement specifications, the functional specifications, operational specifications, and vendor qualification. Your IQ to check on arrival as purchased, check installation of hardware and software. OQ, testing key operation functions, test of security functions, and then our PQ for testing of specified application, preventative maintenance, and ongoing performance test. You may have come across a term called GAMP. GAMP stands for Good Automated Manufacturing Practices. The most current up-to-date version of GAMP is GAMP5. GAMP5 was launched in 2005. It is less prescriptive approach than the 4Vs, with greater emphasis on risk assessment. It sets out principles and procedures that help to ensure that pharmaceutical or medical device products have the required quality and details a recognized standard for computer system validation. GAMP5 is both a technical subcommittee of the International Society for Pharmaceutical Engineering, the ISPE, and it's also a set of guidelines for manufacturers and users of automated or computer systems in the pharmaceutical industry. One of the core principles of GAMP is that quality cannot be tested into a batch of product or a device, but must be built into each stage of the manufacturing process. As a result, GAMP covers all aspects of production, from the raw materials, the facility and equipment, to the training and the hygiene of staff. Standard operating procedures are essential for processes that can affect the quality of the finished product. Electronic signatures and electronic records are also covered in GAMP5. GAMP5 and the V model. The V model can also be applied to GAMP. It works really well if the validation process also includes software development. However, it does not address some important steps such as vendor assessment. It can be quite complex for true commercial off-the-shelf systems with no code development for customization. Phases like DQ or code development and testing are not necessary for those systems, and the 4Q model is recommended in that case instead. So our V model looks something like this in terms of good automated practice. So our customer comes up with the user requirement specification. We've got our functional specification, hardware design, and software design done in conjunction with the customer and supplier. Your software module specification is developed by your supplier. Your code modules are constructed. The software module testing, software integrity testing, hardware acceptance testing, systems acceptance testing, and your maintenance change control. The user requirement specification, the URS. This describes what the user needs from the software and how they will use it. It also contains any critical constraints such as regulations, safety requirements, or operational requirements, etc. For example, here's a list of a few user requirements that might be needed for a lab system. It must track training of lab analysts on lab methods and techniques, track samples coming into the lab, automatically assign lab analysts to test samples based on availability and on training, send sample testing pass-fail outcomes to the ERP system, comply with regulations. Functional specifications. This describes how the software needs to work and look to meet the user's needs. It may include descriptions of how specific screens and reports should look, or describe data that needs to be captured. It can also include logic and calculations, along with how it will comply with regulatory requirements. For example, the Part 11 compliance requirements might detail how passwords or the audit trail should work. Design specification. This contains all of the technical elements of the software or systems. That includes the database design, so file structures, field definitions, data flow diagrams, entity relationship diagrams. The logic or the process design, so pseudocode for logic and calculations. Security design, virus protection, hacker protection. Interface design, what data will move from one system to another, how and how often, and failure handling. Architecture design, required hardware, operating systems, application versions or middleware. Network requirements, specific peripheral devices such as scanners or printers, etc. System build. The system then, we develop or purchase our software and configure it to the specification documents. This step includes unit testing and integration testing. Installation qualification tests. Provides confirmation that the software or the system is installed and set up according to the design specification. Usually, the software is first installed in a test or a validation environment, but there can be exceptions in situations such as manufacturing. Operational qualification, often referred to as functional testing or system testing. OQ tests confirm that all functionality defined in the functional specification is present and working correctly, and that there are no bugs. OQ tests can also include confirmation of any design elements not tested during IQ, such as configuration, that they are working as specified. Performance qualification. This is often called user acceptance testing. PQ testing confirms that the software will meet the user's needs and that it is suitable for their intended use, as defined in their user requirement specification. Testing can follow use cases, SOPs, user-defined scenarios, etc. For simple software like reports or spreadsheets, OQ and PQ testing are often combined. So verification is consistency, completeness and correctness of the software and its supporting documentation, and it includes all of the steps that we mentioned already. Qualification then is the formal testing to demonstrate the software meets its specified requirements, and the qualification comprises of your IQ, OQ and PQ. GAM5 defines different categories of software. Category 1 is infrastructure software. This is layered software in operating environments. Examples of it are operating systems, programming languages, and spreadsheets. Category 2 has been deleted from GAM4 and it used to be firmware. Category 3 is non-configured. So here the description is runtime parameters may be entered and stored, but software cannot be configured. Examples are firmware-based applications or off-the-shelf software and instruments. Category 4 is configured, so it's complex software, it's configurable, and the software code is not altered. Examples of that might be a lab management system, your data acquisition system, SCADA, ERP, building management systems, or certain spreadsheets. Category 5 then is custom. The software is custom designed and coded to suit the business process. Examples of it may be IT applications, process control applications, custom ladder logic, custom firmware, and certain spreadsheets using macros. Commercially available operating systems. Commercially established operating systems are not subject to specific validation, although their features are functionally tested and challenged indirectly during testing of the application. The name and version of the operating system should be documented and verified during the IQ. Change control should be applied to manage upgrades to the operating system. The impact of new modified or removed features should be determined. Firmware. Instrumentation and controllers often incorporate firmware, so things like your weighing scales, barcode scanners, things like that. The configuration of this firmware may be required in order to set up a runtime environment and process parameters. The name, version number, and any configurations or calibration for the firmware should be documented and verified during the IQ. Functionality should be tested during OQ, and change controls must be applied. Standard software packages. Commercially available standard software packages, so off-the-shelf packages, for example HPLC, statistical analysis, etc. The package is not configured to define the business or manufacturing process itself. Configuration is limited to establishing runtime environment of the package, so for example network and printer connections. The version of the package would be documented and verified during IQ. The URS should be reviewed and documented and tested during OQ. Supplier audits may be required. Configurable software packages. These provide standard interfaces and functions that enable configuration of user-specific businesses or manufacturing processes, configuring predefined software modules, and possibly developing further bespoke or customized modules. They often have layers of software. Software packages should be proven and reputable. The supplier audit is usually required. Users are responsible for ensuring that the software and hardware are fit for purpose. Validation should ensure that the software package meets the URS. Custom or bespoke software. Systems developed to meet the specific needs of the user. Customization may be for a complete system or for an extension to an existing system. Often very complex with layers of software. A supplier audit is usually required. The validation plan should define a full cycle approach to validation of the application. The validation plan should define strategies for the mitigation of any system weaknesses that have been identified. Hardware. So hardware can be standard or customized. For standard hardware, mostly it consists of components and comes boxed, as in a PC or a server. The validation requirements in that case would be an IQ to verify installation and the connection, to verify serial numbers, network diagrams, etc., to manage all the configurations and the changes. Customized. Occasionally, hardware is customized, in which case it must be proven to be fit for intended purpose. A supplier audit will be required. The validation requirements for customized hardware include a design specification, an IQ, acceptance testing, compatibility testing, and manage of all configurations and changes through your change control system. The cloud and GMP. Technology is always moving forward. A hot topic for discussion with companies and regulators at the moment is the utilization of cloud technology. Pharmaceutical manufacturers have been hesitant to adopt cloud-based IT solutions. This is usually because they want to retain their data and the control of it. How can sites maintain the validated state of cloud-based software that can be updated without warning by the vendor? There are typically three categories of cloud solutions, depending on the software service that is consumed and on the level of control that accompanies. The first is Infrastructure as a Service, known as IaaS, so for example, a HP Cloud. 2 is Platform as a Service, PaaS, for example, a Google App Engine or an OpenShift. 3. Software as a Service, SaaS, for example, Microsoft Office 365, which allows you to rent Microsoft Word, Excel, etc. for a monthly fee. The first two options do not really represent an issue for most GMP regulated companies, provided that normal vendor assurance programs have been followed and technical agreements for crucial GXP impacting elements are in place. Typically, these are seen as GAMP Category 1 software. However, option 3, Software as a Service, is a GMP risk. It is possible to use software as a service application hosted on a server managed by an industry knowledgeable provider rather than one that is open to all. This option sees the provider taking responsibility for maintenance, such as patch release, with them performing the necessary testing. The provider then alerts the regulated customers of the pending change prior to releasing it, only after sign-off by QA, and usually all affected parties would need to agree. This is an emerging issue that companies are starting to deal with. You can see where the C in CGMP is coming into play. Other references and further reading. There are some very interesting articles here for you to have a look through. They will be listed in your appendix section to this lesson. Over to you. What needs to be validated in computer system validation? What is GAMP 5? What are the considerations you would make to plan a computer system validation project? Thank you very much for your time and attention.